Okay, today we're going to be working on O2 Jetta 1.8 turbo. Has an overheating problem. We have established it's the water pump. We're getting no circulation. So we're going to begin by removing the coolant tank. There's two screws located down in here, Phillips screwdriver. We're going to loosen those two screws using either a pair of pliers or a tool like this. You can compress this clamp, pull it back, remove that, take this hose off, and then the connector to the bottle, squeeze on both sides, pull that out. Bottle can be removed. Okay, and meanwhile, we're going to leave the bottom end connected. I like to disconnect all these hoses, the fuel line, take this off on this end. Okay, simply by depressing this little, if you look, inspect it, you will find a little piece right here you can push in and pull up, get that out of the way. Then on the other end of the fuel line, just so you don't mix them up, using the same tool, squeeze the clamp and disconnect that. It will rotate around so you can swing that right out of the way. Okay, next, the line from the hose, we'll put that over here. For the coolant tank, put that over there. Take the coolant tank. Before we move the coolant tank, we need to disconnect the power steering hose. Same tool again. Right over here, we're going to compress that, move that hose out of the way, take the clamp off, move it out of the way. Now with a 10mm socket and a ratchet, we can come over here. This piece that holds the wire, right? You can just pull that off. That will come off if you just twist and pull. It's just normally it's pressed on to the top of the screw that holds the reservoir down for the power steering. 10mm, a deep socket, can loosen that, take that off, place that out of the way. Now the tank can be removed, can be lifted out. I'm not going to disconnect this end, I'll just leave it on. Swing it underneath this hose. Be careful you don't break any of the connectors. Swing it around here, get it out of the way. Tank can be placed out of the way over the engine. Now before doing all of that, I had to remove this cover, which is simply a clip on this end, clip on this end. That's the upper timing belt cover. Okay, snap it off, take it off, get that out of the way. Disconnect any hoses that are in your way. And now you can get to the mount. You can get a close-up of the mount. You can get down to the motor mount. All right? It's held down over here by two 8mm screws. Loosen those. Of course, you would need a breaker bar or an air tool to loosen this. I've already done so. And then you have two 16mm down in here. Okay, that holds this mount on. Take those off. All of these screws, I have loosened them previously to make the job, this recording, go a little faster. Okay, when those are loose, then you have two 13mm. down in here holding this bracket on. Loosen that, take them off, and then you can lift the bracket out of place. Okay, set that out of the way. And remember, when you drop these screws, try and fish them out right away. But I'm having a problem with that, so I'll move on and lift this bracket out of place. The mount. Motor mount is out. Now, this bracket here is held in to the engine block by 3 16mm screws that go into the block. They're a little difficult to get to. So to loosen the top one, I'm going to raise the engine. I will show you later on how I supported the engine. Right? I also disconnected the dog bone mount underneath so you don't stretch that too much and cause damage to that. Check all your hoses. Make sure as you move the engine up and down that you're not stressing any of the hoses or wire. So now I'm going to move the engine up so I can get to that top screw. Give you a little bit more light. I loosened those previously. In fact, I had to reassemble this so I could show you how it's done. Normally, I will loosen the most difficult one to reach, which is the center one, the one down in here, and then leave the easy one last, so you don't be struggling with that middle one, because as long as you have one of them holding it tight to the block, it's easier to work that screw loose. Okay? Now, before taking this out, I'm going to go down below and show you how to get the other screw on the bottom. But before that, also, let me show you something else. When you're taking when you're removing your serpentine belt, which is right, located right, this the tensioner right here, I used a 16mm, in fact, I think it was 15. Right up in here, there's a little rectangular piece on the top that you can put a wrench like this in and release the tension. When you release that tension, there's a hole in that same piece that you can run a nail, a long enough nail, right size nail, or a punch through to lock that. Now, after locking that, you have 3 13mm screws that hold this tensioner on. Loosen the screws. Take them off, and this baby should pop right out. That one's still in there. All right, got that right out. Now this is how I align this. By putting the wrench right on here, prying it towards the front of the car, get the holes lined up, and then put something in there to lock it. Okay, now we are gonna, next move is to get the other screw out of the bracket for the motor mount, which is already loose and ready to come out with the 16mm socket. And while I'm down here, I will show you how I loosen the Allens that hold the crank pulley in place. by using a socket and locking it on with a center nut and a ratchet with the Allen key in it. You need to work these in opposite direction. So I'm going to turn this clockwise as I loosen counterclockwise. Okay, so I'm holding this in place and turning it this way to break it loose. With those loose, there's 4 of them. I'll take them out. But I'm going to leave one in because we have to set the timing in place, and I like to check their timing 3 ways. One is the mark that's on the pulley against the timing, the lower timing belt cover, and 2 will be, I will show you that later. As you can see, right now I have a neoprene piece on top of the jack. You can use a block of wood between the jack and the oil pan of the engine so you don't damage that pan. I've seen people do this job without putting anything between the jack, and there was no damage caused, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, using your 16 millimeter and a breaker bar, get down in here. You can stick your finger down in here and feel for the other screw. Get down in there, find that, and break that loose. Okay, once it's loose, you can use this socket by itself. Stick it down in there and turn. Okay, that is why it's important to leave the easy one, like this one on the top or the one on the bottom, in place in order to do this, because it's a tighter space. Then you can turn it out and loosen that very easily. I'll continue taking the top one off. And these screws, they're different length. Okay, the bottom one, I believe the bottom one and the top one are longer than the top right. They're longer than the top left. So make sure you remember where to go and put them in the right place. Else, if you put the long one in the wrong place, you would never be able to tighten it up. Okay, this baby is loose now. Using the magnet or just playing around with this, you should be able to get the screw out. Okay, this is the top right, and this is actually the bottom one is shorter. Let me pull the other one and check it against the other two to see whether they're all the same length, whether they're all different sizes or not. I do believe there are 2 of them the same length. Okay, now, the top right is longer than the other 2, okay? So I like to leave these 2 together. I'll just leave one on the bottom and one on the top, left side of the car. Now, getting this bracket out can be a pain in the neck. We have to move this engine up and down until we find a sweet spot where we can get it out. And it's a problem because part of this bracket goes in between the water pump and the tensioner, the belt tensioner. Okay. Now that I have found my sweet spot after jacking the engine up and down, I can go ahead and remove this bracket, the motor mount bracket. I mean, each time you move the engine up and down, you have to try getting this bracket out. I thought I found it, and okay, there you go. I'm gonna sit it, once I get it completely out of the way. Almost. The difficult part is done. To get this out of that hole. There you go. Bring it up, slide it up. It definitely is a puzzle. Now with that out of the way, this is what we have here. All right. Water pump is right over there. Timing belt tensioner is the pulley, tensioner pulley is here. The actual hydraulic tensioner is over here, and that's held on by two 10mm, one directly underneath the roller. This is the roller right here for the belt, one directly underneath it, and one back here. Okay? So next, I'm gonna set my timing marks. Now with socket and ratchet, 12-point socket, I believe, don't have my glasses on. It looks like a 19mm, 12-point. We're gonna go down bottom, the same socket we use when we're loosening that tension up in timing belt crank pulley. Same socket. Gonna use that socket on the crank pulley and rotate that crank pulley until your marks line up. All right, there's a mark right here. Got to line up with a notch in the timing belt cover. Okay, that's a little off. So what I'm going to do is you can also use 16mm wrench on the cam sprocket and just tap that around until it lines up. Okay, I generally don't use that to turn the engine because you're not supposed to. All right, with this mark here, line up with this mark here, then I would check down here on the crankshaft pulley. There's a notch in that also. That's supposed to line up with a little indentation in the lower cover. And something else I like to do is take number one spark plug out, stick a long screwdriver down in there, and as you turn, that screwdriver will go down or up until the mouth lines up. I keep my finger on it like this and press against the hole, the spark plug hole. As I feel that rise, pull it, the screwdriver sliding through my finger. At some point, that screwdriver begin to go down. Then you just go in the opposite direction until you find it's top dead center. It will start going up and just about start to go down. Then you check your marks again and make sure they're lined up. Okay? After that, what you want to do is, I've already taken these off, the tensioner and the hydraulic tensioner. But I'm going to show you later on how that's done. All right? If you have some slack in your belt, I wouldn't advise this if your belt is really tight. Take an 8mm Allen and loosen the screw in the center of your tensioner pulley. All right, once that's loose, you can slide your belt off. Okay, if it's very tight, don't do that because you might put pressure on as that screw comes up on the very last thread or so. You might cause a little damage to the thread in the cylinder head. All right, whip that out, get that out of the way. Get your belt off. Just move it over to the side. 10mm, you loosen your two screws that hold your tensioner pulley on. Your hydraulic tensioner on. Take them out. Well, fell down the bottom. All right, this is a hydraulic tensioner. Now what you can do is get the right, I don't have one here, but find the right thread it all the way up, and a nut to match that will thread into this hole. Okay? You want to thread that into the hole, and before you thread that into the hole, take a couple of washers, run them up, just put them on this, run the nut up on the screw all the way up top, and then put the washers on the bottom of that nut. Screw this into the hole, right? This is how you depress this tensioner. Basically, you're looking at this. This is going to set up. This is the way it is. The plunger of the hydraulic tensioner rests up against the bottom of here. So with it in place like this, once you run that screw down in here into there with the washers on the bottom, then you begin to tighten the nut that's on the screw, tighten it down, and that will depress this. And that will release the tension on the pulley. On your belt. Okay, if not, just take this off. Okay, now I'm going to go down below and remove the last screw out of this crank pulley and remove that. Okay, with the screw loose and removed, all I need to do is jiggle this back and forth, up, down, well, more up, down, in, up, rather than, you do not want to turn it. You do not want to turn it that fully as you're taking it off because you've already set your timing marks. All right, now at this point, I will also go down below and move the upper timing belt cover, this right here. With the 10mm ratchet, I will loosen the, take off the last two screws that hold this cover on. I know you probably can't see this, but once I come up, I will show you where the screws go. Almost there. Okay, both screws out. Time is going to cover in hand. All right. Now, the last two screws I removed were down in this position here. One here and one here. The other two that held this on were here and here. All right? Those are the first two you moved when you were taking off, when I was taking off the middle cover. And that timing mark is, look in the camera, see if you can see it. That timing mark is right here on the cover. That little indentation right here. All right? Now I can remove the timing belt from around the sprocket. And start working on the water pump. 3 screws hold these on. They are also 10mm. One here to the right, more closer to the front of the car. Take that out. One down below here. If you're not sure where they feel around, I've already taken this one out. That goes down right here. Now I'm going to take the top one off. Always leave the easier screw to reach to last. In this case, it doesn't really matter because the pump is not going to fall out. Wiggle the pump out of place. It will be more difficult than this. I've already had this out. Wiggle it out. Now, let me show you the issue with this. Impeller looks great, right? Impeller looks good all the way around. There's no break in it except where it's attached to the shaft that goes through the sprocket here and come out the back. I can hold on to the sprocket and turn the impeller, just roll it around like this. This is the problem. Cannot pump any water when it's like this. All right? Now, while doing this, might as well replace everything in that area that might go bad. And that's the timing belt, the tensioner, and the hydraulic tensioner. You can buy that in a kit for around $150. Okay, get the new pump, clean off the hole, the surface, clean it off nicely. This engine is pretty filthy, so when I'm done, I will clean off the whole engine, top and bottom. All right? Okay, this is the new kit, all right, that I got from my supplier, local supplier. In here, we have the water pump. And as you can see, if I grip onto this and try turning this, does not move. And I got the one with the metal impeller because from my experience, I have not seen one of these fail that way before. Okay? And this is the timing belt, tensioner and hydraulic tensioner. That's why I have a razor blade, make sure I don't cut the belt. Easier to come out of here, cutting and pulling. Okay, now I think they misled me because I do not have the hydraulic tensioner in this kit. They sent me a roller, but no hydraulic tensioner. Okay, folks, I was a little disappointed with my supplier that they sent me a kit, something they call a kit, without the hydraulic tensioner. All right, you had in the kit that is sold, I just got the belt and the concentric roller. I had to buy the pump separate and the hydraulic tensioner separate. Overall, this cost me almost $200. You should be able to find this stuff online or some other supplier for around $150. Okay, I have put the belt. I have the water pump on. The hydraulic tensioner is only held on by the bottom screw. Okay, and I have the belt going around the crankshaft sprocket. Make sure the grooves in the belt is in place with the groove on the sprocket and not sitting on top of the groove. All right, after tightening the pump down, there's already an O-ring on the pump. It comes with the pump. You can put a little lubricant around it. Sometimes I use a little bit of liquid detergent around it so it's sliding easily and you don't mess up the O-ring. Or sometimes I spray a little WD-40 or something like that on it. Okay, over here is a mark on the cam sprocket. I put that there so it will be easily seen, and there's a mark also here in the timing belt cover, supposed to make sure these two are lined up. But normally you would do this before you take off the belt. Now I'm going to place the lower timing belt cover on. I've also put some white on that mark so it will be easily seen. Once it's on, I will install the pulley, the crank pulley, so I can line that mark up the pulley up with this mark. Okay, two things. Your crank pulley will have 6 holes. Actually, there's only 4 of them that you use to bolt this pulley on to the crankshaft sprocket, plus 2 other holes, and they're smaller than the 4 holes. Only one of these holes here, the one I have marked with white around it, will fit over a little nipple on the surface of the flat surface of the crankshaft sprocket. There's a little nipple on there. You place this on with that nipple coming up through this hole, and then these 4 holes should line up. Okay? Once they line up, put the 4 screws in there and tighten them down. Now, next, I'm going to put on this concentric adjuster for the belt, and this portion right here rides on the plunger of the hydraulic adjuster. There's a pin, it comes with a pin installed through that plunger to keep it in. Do not pull that pin out until everything is in place, the belt and everything, and that's the last thing you do is pull that out. Okay? So I'm going to place this on, set up the belt, the timing and everything, and walk you through that. Oh yeah, on the back of the pulley is a washer. Do not lose this washer. There's a plastic sleeve that was installed on here to keep that washer in place. Remove that before you install this. Of course, you won't be able to install the screw, tighten the screw in the hole if that plastic piece is still on. Okay, I do believe you can see the mark here on the crank pulley and the timing belt, the lower timing belt cover. What I like to do, I do mine a little different than other folks. I like to put, with the belt on, I like to grab either side of the belt and pull and up, say put my right hand up, and that pulley mark will move, and pull back with my left hand until they line up perfectly. Okay? I do that to make sure that the belt is in the groove on the camshaft sprocket. Once I do that, I pass it over the pump. Okay, turn the pump slightly to make sure it locks in. The upper end, pass that over let me get the camera onto this. Now, the upper end of the belt, this end, I bring that in line with the camshaft sprocket, but I use my 16mm box end, and I rotate, pulling in that direction towards your left. I bring that back like half a tooth. Okay, and the belt drops in the groove. Keeping pressure with your left hand over there. The right hand, I like to drop this down in between the 2 little, whatever you call it, flanges on the idler pulley, and then feed this around. But I don't really drive this pulley all the way in, because I like some movement in it, and that makes it easier for me to get the belt on it. At that point, I pull the belt like halfway back off the sprocket, and that makes it a lot easier for me to feed this belt in place. Okay, now the belt is in. All I have to do is push everything back towards the head. All right, this side is already pretty tight because I pulled it towards my left. So that's already tight. Marks down here have not moved. Double check that mark on the sprocket. Hasn't moved. And the mark on the camshaft sprocket is right on. At that point, I can put in the top screw for the hydraulic tensioner. Okay, top screw has been put in place, and top and bottom screw tighten up. The center screw for this pulley right here, the concentric pulley, make sure that's tight also. And at this point, I go around and check the water pump screws, hydraulic tensioner screw, this screw, all my timing marks, and make sure everything is on point. Before you put the timing belt cover on. And the rest of it is the reverse of when you're taking it apart, the disassembly. Once you do that, pieces back on. I usually like to take or just do it with your ignition off, turn the crank 2-3 times through 3 full revolutions. Make sure everything is cool, nothing jamming up, no valves hitting. And then you get in the car, turn your key, and should be ready to go. Oh, do yourself a favor. Do not forget to pull this pin out of the hydraulic tensioner. All right? You can lift the follower up to make sure there's movement. And something else. I ran into a problem once where, after installing the tensioner, you have to be able to move it. It has to move. If it doesn't move freely, then something is wrong. And what I surmise had happened, somebody had to re-tap that hole that this screw go in, and it wasn't done correctly. So it was slightly off. Now, as I tighten the center one down, what happened, this would not move. And that's no good. It has to move freely. So what I ended up doing, there's a washer that go on the back here. I removed the screw and the washer and took, let's say, maybe a couple of thousandths of an inch off of this surface. Put the screw back, the washer on, and then I got free movement. Because the washer doesn't ride up against this surface. The washer actually doesn't ride up against this surface, it actually rides up against the flat part on the screws, this part right here. Okay, so you have to have clearance between this and this surface, the washer and this surface.